up. My name's Abby. I am a children's and adult services or children's and teen services librarian. This is my first ever adult program. So if you have feedback, I welcome feedback. Kids don't usually give anything other than that project was really cool. So I've been sewing for almost 15 years. And I have two kids who blow out a lot of knees. So I've learned how to fix a lot of pants because of all those blown out knees. So today I'm going to show you a few different, very simple beginner repairs. We're going to learn how to replace a button. We're going to learn two different methods for hemming a garment. And we're going to learn patches and the crotch repair when you rub the inside of your jeans out and you want it to be, these are my wife's favorite jeans. I've repaired them multiple times and she still wants to wear them. So I keep fixing them. You don't want to lose your favorite pair of jeans, even when you start to blow out the crotch a little bit. So, but you also don't want that to be visible. So like the knee repair here, this is called visible mending. You can see it, it kind of draws attention. It looks pretty cool. You can do it in like a bright color if you want, but you don't want the crotch to be visible. You want that to be as invisible as possible after you repair it. So that is what we're going to do today. When you're doing a patch on a piece of fabric that's ripped, you can either do a visible patch, which is something that would be on the top of your fabric, or you can do an invisible patch, which is on the back. Depending on how large your hole is. If I'm actually going to cut a hole in this fabric so that you can kind of see. So if I have a hole like this, I want to clean up all of my little edges, the raw bits that are hanging out so that I've got a clean repair. And if I'm doing a patch on the top, I really like this little strawberry fabric. So if I'm doing the patch on the top, I would take this to an iron. Most of sewing, if you've done any sewing before, is ironing. It's all ironing all the time. So you take it to an iron and I would press down all these little edges. So like these, instead of leaving the raw edges out and sewing them on like that, I would turn them under and press them so that they are, so that the raw edges are covered and don't just fray as soon as you wash it. So
that's just like a regular piece of fabric, or is it a dedicated patch?
So it's just a regular piece of fabric. I usually like to repair something with a fabric that's as similar to your original fabric as possible. So like when I repair a pair of jeans, the fabric, the patch that's underneath this is denim. When I did this fabric is as close to the original as possible. It doesn't have to be the same color, but it should be like, if you're repairing something that's silk, you should repair it with a lightweight silk. If you're repairing jeans, you should repair it with a piece of denim. I don't really like the denim, like the iron-on patches. They like peel off on the edges and sometimes they fray. So I usually just use whatever I've got lying around the house. So I usually like to repair, so you'll see I do a lot of visible repairs, and I usually like to repair in either sashiko thread, which you can buy online, or like a pearled cotton, something that's not gonna, not like embroidery floss that's gonna fall apart, something heavy and thick. So when you're doing a repair, you can basically do any of multiple methods. What I usually do, I'm going to take this over here. Can you see this? Okay. What I usually do is just a simple running stitch. So start from the back and go around the edges like this. And if you guys want to come up so that you can see these closer, you can. The smaller your stitches, the more secure it is. And like I said, if you press that ahead of time, so I did not iron this ahead of time. And if I actually wore this, it might buckle a little bit, but if you press it ahead of time, it'll be much flatter. And if you sew it like on a flat surface, that also helps the repair stay flat. So one of the things that you should do is sew all the way around. You can sew either with this stitch, this running stitch, or you can use a whip stitch, which I'll show around this other edge. So for that, I'm just going to kind of whip around the edge.
Put the needle on the middle. Yeah,
You see that? Okay.
just for the one.
Yeah.
So what
Right.
stitch is?
So a whip stitch goes kind of around like these. So here's your running stitch, and that one goes up and down like that. Here's your whip stitch, which kind of whips around the edge. I'm going to show a couple. I'm just going to go all the way around this and show you a bunch of different ways to get a patch on a piece of fabric. So I'm just going to keep folding this and do a couple more. It kind of depends on how visible you want your stitches to be, how visible you want your patch to be. So the next one I'm going to do is, oh, what is it? Ladder stitch, I think it's called. Doesn't really matter what it's called. It's basically as invisible as you can be. So you'll kind of pick up a little bit of fabric, but not go all the way through. So I'm going to go through my bottom, and then I'm going to go just through the fold of my patch. So instead of going all the way through, I'm just going through the fold. And with that, you can see it because it's a bright green fabric. But if I were using like a white or a red fabric, you would, or white or red thread, you probably wouldn't be able to see these stitches as clearly. But I'll show you guys this one. So this one, I take my needle and I dip into the fabric I'm repairing, and then I just snag a little bit inside that fold. So most of my thread is hidden. So if I were using a white thread, you wouldn't be able to see very much of that at all. Right
You
here.
like have to fold this one.
Yeah, yep. So I've been folding all of them because if you leave the raw edges,
Yeah.
it can fray. It'll fray in the wash. I'm mostly concerned about durability because I'm a mom. But if you're not as concerned about durability, you can also use, like, I've got a couple pairs of pinking shears over here. So if you use a pair of pinking shears, you don't need to turn it under because the pinking shears will zigzag the cut and the fabric won't fray as badly. So you can do that. Another really secure way of stitching is backstitch. And I know you learned this in the program and at the Carnegie.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll demo that one for you guys too. So for a backstitch, let me see this. Instead of continuing forward, you come out ahead of where you want to be, and then you stitch backwards into your last stitch. So this looks more like what you might see a sewing machine sew, because it's one continuous stitch at the end. And because you're essentially sewing the same thing twice, it's really secure. So if you are sewing something that you know is going to get a lot of use, if it's like a pair of jeans that you're gardening in, and you know you're going to be on your knees in the dirt, then this stitch is a really good way to hold that together. So just going forward ahead of where you want to be, and then going back to the last stitch that you did. All right, so those are our different stitches that we can use to secure a patch on the top of our fabric. Once you're sewn all the way around, you don't really need to worry about the back. If you want to, you can also just like stitch a zigzag across the back, but you're basically replacing the back fabric with this new patch in the front. So I'm gonna grab another piece. And I'll show you how I might do like a rear repair, like the one that I did on these jeans. So again, I'm just gonna slash a hole through this fabric. And if my fabric were heavily frayed, I can show you on a pair of pants that I have. These are my kids' pants. You blew out the knees of these. And you can see there's a whole lot of fraying all around the edges of this. I'm gonna clean all of that up so that it doesn't snag on anything later. So you'll just kind of go around and make sure that you get all the extra fraying and all the extra threads that are falling off already. Clean all of those up so you know exactly how big your patch needs to be and how much needs to be repaired. All right, so it should be a lot cleaner. You can even clean up like this back stuff. I probably will do that when I repair these. And actually, I brought both of these so that you can see kind of the difference between like situations when you should repair something on the front and when you should do it on the back. So these pants are lined. I can't really put a patch on the back because I'd have to sew through the lining too. And I don't want to sew the lining to the front. So I would patch these ones on the front. These ones though, these are a single layer. So I would probably, these are super fun. So I might actually do like a tiger shaped patch on the front, on the outside, but I could also just patch it. These are again, a knee tear. I could also just patch it from behind because they're a single layer. So if I didn't want it to show and I didn't want to like mess up the pattern, I could just patch it from behind. So when I am patching from behind, I'm cleaning up my hole. Hello, my name is Abby. Did you bring anything with you to fix?
Yeah, I brought a few things.
Okay. All right, great. I'm just going over a couple of simpler repairs, and then I'll probably show you, and I'm doing holes right now, and then I'll probably show you hems. I was also going to do buttons, but I think most of you know how to do buttons. Tara probably does too. You know how to do buttons? Okay. So we'll do how to fix like a dropped hem, and then how to repair the the wear in a crotch seam. So I just did a front patch, and I'll show you that at the end if you want to see that. Right now we're going to do a back patch. So I have a piece of fabric with a hole in it. And I'm going to cut my back patch so that it covers the hole and then some. If this were jeans, like that crotch repair, I might actually stitch a feasible into the back. But mostly I just want to make sure that my fabric covers the whole hole and then the outside, especially because you'll notice, like, when you have a hole in your jeans, you also have wear, like, all the way around it. A hole doesn't happen all by itself. So you want to strengthen all of the fabric around it so that you don't get a tear like an inch away from the original hole. All right, so when I'm doing a patch on the back, actually, I still got this. So I'm going to show you guys what I did to do this, this repair on the jeans. You can use all of the stitches that I used on this as well. I've seen the whip stitch used like around the hole to make just like a circle. I like to do that too, but one of my favorites is just straight up and down stitching. It holds everything together really well, and I think it looks kind of cool. So for that, you are just going straight through. And when I do these, I like to, instead of pulling the needle through every single stitch, I like to kind of gather them up. So this is what a traditional running stitch looks like. You just kind of gather stitches up onto your needle. And once you've got enough, once the needle's full, you pull the needle through, and then you've got a handful of stitches. I usually like to do my turns on the back so you don't see like the cross stitches on the front. So even if you're no longer, like I'm no longer on the patch, that's okay. It doesn't matter. And you can also stagger your stitches. So you can keep your stitches all in the same line. This fabric's really nice because it's got nice straight lines for you already there. So you can follow those straight lines. If you don't have fabric that's already got lines on it, if you're not sewing like a striped fabric, you can use like chalk or a fabric marker to draw straight lines for you to follow. But basically, you'll just follow that up and down. It's actually better if the stitches don't do what mine did right here, where they're right next to each other, because you'll find that the fabric will start to buckle. So if instead you can make sure that you have like alternating threads, alternating stitches, and they're not all like perfectly lined up. So I'll show you guys these. My totally imperfect stitches tonight because I'm stitching like standing up. A running stitch is often easier if you are stitching on a table. So if I were to do this on the table, a table you don't really care about. So I'm being very careful not to scratch our tables, but I wouldn't recommend doing this on like your nice wood dining table, but it gives you a nice flat surface. And then you just do that all the way across the hole. If you've got a fabric that's fraying a lot, or that you know will fray a lot, it probably would be good to do some stitches around the edge of the hole. So I'll show you that really quick. You can even, once you trim this, you can even turn the edges of your hole under like I showed you on the patch, press those with an iron and then stitch. And that will keep it from fraying. So if you've got something that frays a lot, you can stitch it sort of like you're stitching a patch on, except you're stitching your damaged garment to the back, to the patch. This is really hard to do standing up, you guys. I recommend sitting in a nice, comfortable seat while you're doing this. But yeah, just like that, less slappy because it'll be visible. But you'll just go around after pressing. Like I said earlier, I always recommend pressing first just because it gives you like a nice flat area to work with. Things aren't going to be buckling later. So that is how you do those. I'm also going to demo 2 different kinds of hems. So those are my patches. And I think I actually will get that iron started for the hems. All right, so there are 2 ways of fixing a hem. And basically you want to look at whatever garment you're fixing when you're repairing your hem. So I just pressed that flat. So if your hem falls out, I've had a couple of hems do this, the stitching of like if you have like a nice pair of slacks, or if you've got a dress and the hem is stitched invisibly, that's the first one I'll show you. The hems can just, like, if you snag a thread, the whole hem might fall. So I'll show you how to fix those. And you can also use the same repair to like hem a dress shorter, but invisibly. So when I was stitching earlier, I was using a much larger needle. Right now, I'm going to use a tiny little sharp because I'm doing finer sewing. I feel like a lot of sewing is sort of like matching your materials to each other. So you're matching your patch to your material, you're matching your thread to your fabric, you're matching your needle to the thread that you're using. I would never use this tiny sharp to sew something with denim. I'd never get it through and it would probably hurt my fingers. So just like whatever you're sewing, if you're sewing very thin fabric, make sure your needle is very thin and sharp. So for this one, is it possible for me to put this on the table so she can see this? Okay, so I'm going to do what's called a catch stitch, where you're really only catching a couple pieces of thread on the right side of your fabric. So I'll catch some, actually, we'll work from this way. I'll catch as much as I need on the part that I'm hemming. And then when I come up here, I'm really only going to grab like 2 or 3 threads. And then I grab some more threads from the part that I'm hemming. And then I come back up here and I really only grab 2 threads again. So the actual hem, you can pick up as many stitches as you want to make yourself feel secure. Even if you want to just do 2 down there too, you can. But once you get to the right side, to the main part of your fabric, you're just gonna take a little bit. And I'm working from left to right using my right hand. If you're left-handed, you can work from right to left. You basically want to create like tiny X's with every stitch. So I'm going from left to right, but my stitches are always pointing back toward the left. So if you've got something like a dress or a nice pair of slacks that has like an invisible hem, this is what it'll look like on the right side. And that is how you would repair it or hem it shorter if you wanted to on the wrong side. So I'll show you guys what that looks like up close. So each one is kind of going backwards. And this video is going to be up for people to see later.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you need a review, I've also found videos on this on YouTube. So this is what it looks like on the right side. You can make them I would catch anywhere from 1 to 3 threads on the right side. And on the wrong side, you pick up part of your hem. And then here, again, just like a couple of threads.
What is the name of this?
It's called a catch stitch. I think I've heard other names for it too, but that's what I've always called it. I also have a mom, like my mom, I learned how to sew because my mom sews. So I might call things things that other people use different words for, or it could be regional. So yeah, so that's like the invisible stitching that you see if you want to do like an invisible hem. Yeah. Do you want to see the repair or the
Stitch, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what the right side looks like. And that's what the wrong side looks like. All right. So we'll also go over how to sew like a regular like machine stitch hem. If you don't have a machine at home, or if you don't have that thread, you want to make it look exactly like this does. Oh, I have to fix the back of these too. These jeans need so much repair. So whatever this like straight stitch across, the best way to do that is by using that same the same back stitch that we did earlier in one of the patch repairs. So again, I'm going to press this flat, and actually, so when you're pressing, like if you're hemming something shorter, so if you were hemming something that was just a regular hem, if you're fixing a hem that has fallen, you can just sew right across that hem. If you want to hem something shorter, then you're going to cut that hem off. And when you do that, make sure that you enclose those raw edges. So I'm not doing that with this because this fabric, this is the selvage of the fabric. It's not going to fray, so I don't need to enclose raw edges because it's not raw, but I'm going to pretend that it is. So when I'm pressing it to hem it, I'm going to enclose that raw edge. I'm going to press it once. And then I'm going to fold it under again and press it again. That way, when I wash it, I'm all about keeping things as durable as possible, because when you wash it, you don't want your hard work to go to waste. So we'll hide that raw edge inside the seam. And then this one, we're going to do the back stitch again. And I'm going to do this, actually, we'll use this. Again, like I've got a lighter weight fabric. If I had like a denim, I would probably use a thick, heavy thread like this, something that matched the thread that sews the denim together. So that top stitching thread that's along the bottom of these jeans, I'd probably use something that was closer to that weight. Since I'm sewing quilting cotton here, if I use something like that, it would probably buckle the fabric. So instead, I'm just going to use this skinny little thread. And always start from the back. I don't think that I mentioned that. And we're going to do a back stitch on this one too. So I always go forward for the first of my back stitches. And then all the rest of them, you start ahead and go back. And you can match this up. You can match up like the length and color of your thread, the length of your stitches and the color of your thread with whatever you're sewing. So if you're stitching together, if you're repairing the hem on like a pair of those khakis, you can match your stitch length to whatever the khakis are. In fact, if you just have like broken threads, you can even match the holes. Like you can find the holes that were the original stitching holes and just stitch new thread through that hole. Kind of depends on what the item is that needs to be repaired. So this is what the back stitch looks like from the front. It's nice and pretty. It's one straight line. From the back, it's a little bit messy because you are going back over the same spot a couple of times. So from here, it might look kind of like what a machine would sew. From the back, you can see that it goes back and forth a couple of times. So here's what the back looks like on that. And if I go forward again, it does look a little bit sloppy, but from the front, everything is one smooth, almost machine stitch line. All right. So those are the patch and the hem repairs. And the last repair, I'm going to show you guys how to do it. I'm going to tell you guys how to do it. And if anyone has one of these, then you have a sewing machine, you can do it at home. If you don't have a sewing machine, we have sewing machines that you can borrow, or you can use ours in the makerspace. But basically, if you have like the crotch wear and tear, you're going to take some fusible. So I have this fusible here. I've got some up here if someone brought jeans, but you're going to take fusible and you're going to just like fuse it to the inside of your jeans. So you'll have like a stabilizer to hold the thread. And then you're going to turn your jeans right side out and pick a thread that's as close as possible to this color. I should probably go over these again even farther out because they've gotten even more wear. But pick threads that are close to this color. With denim, you might even choose like 2 or 3 different colors of thread. You can do this a couple of times. And then you're just going to sew back and forth in one direction. Turn them, maybe change the color of the thread to like a darker or lighter shade, maybe a black if you've got like the black denim, and then sew across in another direction. And then turn it and sew back and forth. And when you're sewing, you're sewing forward, you're hitting that reverse button, you're sewing backward. You're sewing forward, hit that reverse button, you're sewing backward. That's all you have to do. And then you can turn them back inside out and trim off any of the extra fusible. I obviously didn't do that. It's not really necessary. It's just sort of like how you want it to look on the inside, what you want. So that's how you do those. What time is it?
Is it possible with like a pants but it's not?
Yes. And if you've got like if you've got like a pair of khakis, just use that same color thread. Usually, because it's the crotch, you want to use, like, if you don't have an exact match, you want to use something that's very slightly darker instead of lighter, because you don't want to draw light attention to your crotch. So a darker thread will hide the repair better and hide the damage better. And crotch repairs are the one thing that you're like, you don't really want everybody to be looking at it while you're out shopping or working. So yeah, that's how you repair those ones. Does anybody have?
Fusible is like it's like you iron.
Yeah, a fusible you iron on. So the stuff that I've got, this is what it looks like in the store. It's just like white, almost fabric, wrapped around, and you usually have to buy like the whole bolt. And then one side is going to be smooth. Sometimes they've got like knit fusible. So if you've got like a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you'll want to buy some fusible that's stretchy, that's like a knit fusible. Sometimes they've got woven. This is a non-woven fusible, so it's just like, it's just smooth. You can't see any like crossed grain in it. So one side is smooth and then the other side is bumpy. The bumpy side goes bumpy side down on your fabric, and that's like, the bumps are the glue. So don't iron the bumps. Does anybody else have any other questions? Yeah.
Just for like a line of holes like this, you would just sew back and forth. You wouldn't need to patch something like this, like tiny holes.
So, yeah. So with little holes like this, is it? Yeah, it goes all the way through. So you could put a patch on it. Because this is knit, I would probably put like a knit fabric patch on it, like behind it, and then you can sew on top of it just for like extra stabilizing. And you don't want to use like a woven patch, because that will stretch and the woven patch won't, and the patch might rip.
You can buy fabrics like this.
Yeah. Yep. Joanne
Okay.
has a bunch of like sweatshirt fabric, and fleece can be stretchy sometimes. Make sure that whatever you buy, it's like a little bit stretchy. Yep. Does anybody have any other garments we can pull out and take a look at? That's fine.
Weird ones. So these are more of my Peen in the Rear End ones that I saw.
Mhm.
So this is, I don't want to take out the lining, and I know I probably have to. But it's like fraying in here.
I have this in one of my jackets right now. I keep
it's
meaning to fix
infuriating.
it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like,
In the sleeve.
so my mom
Okay.
did the sleeve,
Yeah.
because bless her, I was like, I'm not doing this right now. But she had fixed it, and it's starting in again. So she just did like a little something or other over
Mhm,
here. I didn't
mhm.
question it. But it's starting in again up here a little bit. Like I can see it kind of fraying.
Uh-huh.
And then in this one where I have my ring gets caught on it constantly.
Yeah.
So it kind of does what it wants here.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So
here I am.
no, I have the same thing in my coat upstairs. Like
Like
even
so-
the armholes are torn out.
Yeah.
I was pregnant, like it's a maternity coat, but it still like didn't fit after a while. But like I keep wearing it, so
I
the
kept
rips
wearing
get
it too.
worse.
I
Yeah,
bought this
yeah.
one because it was
You're
like
not-
the same color.
You are
But I
not
was like, I need
alone.
to fix this.
So what your mom did was a good like temporary
Yeah,
fix.
because I was leaving the house. I'm like,
Yeah. The problem is if you do that like on this side, it's actually the fabric. That's the fabric is
it's
also
fraying out.
right. So if you tried to repair that like that, it would be even tighter.
Well, tightening it, the tight part, it's not tight on me. It's just,
Yeah.
I keep running it with.
Yeah.
my-
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, but like these two,
those would
like,
probably, yeah.
yeah. I think that sometimes the linings need more give than they have.
Yeah. And it's
So
it's not like a free flowing set of what
yeah.
I was hoping I didn't have to see.
Yeah. So what I would do is go to like Joanne, find a fabric that matches this. It doesn't have to match it in color. You can even find something fun. Like
Okay.
if you find like a little like floral, like silky, whatever, and then cut a patch
Okay.
and then just like cover it and stitch all the way around it with
Okay.
like a running stitch. Yeah, that's
could
how
do
I
that.
that's how I would fix it.
And the only other thing I could think of was, 'cause I have a serger. I
Mhm.
wasn't sure if that would, but then I'm like, I'm probably gonna come into the same issue.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
because and I've got, that's actually why I haven't fixed it, because I don't have like a good matching fabric. But like I've thought about that. Like if you sew this together, part of the problem is in my coat, part of the problem is that my hips are too wide for the
Okay.
coat.
Yeah, okay.
So
So if I do it
it's
this way
pulling.
and I serge it, it's just gonna come
It's going to
on
be
more
even
up.
tighter. Yeah, yeah. So you don't want it to be smaller in the end. You want to give yourself a little more room. So you might even like separate it out a little bit
Okay.
and then sew on the patch
Okay.
so that it's got a little extra give
Okay.
inside the jacket.
Well, that
yeah.
makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. I brought the annoying thing. Really. I was just like,
What else have you got for me? I love problem solving, you guys.
this one is actually really interesting. So I just don't know where to get the same type of Velcro. I actually got this at a worn wear thing at my college. So they had Patagonia come and they brought all the different things. And they said, okay, there's a small hole in this. You can have it for free if you fix it.
Mhm,
So they did like little patches and stuff for that.
mhm.
But my issue is that I'm having the fraying on here and these are starting to come off. Well, this one came off.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure if I could fix, I have this at home. I just didn't realize it came right off.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure if there was a way to maybe fix this on, or if I should just bite the bullet and replace all the Velcro on the jacket such that it all matches,
Mhm.
because it'll drive me crazy otherwise.
Mhm.
But
You
yeah.
can buy
wasn't
sew
seeing that.
on, yeah, you can buy sew on Velcro. Sometimes it'll be sticky and you can also sew
Okay.
it on. And like if you bought, I know that this is navy, but if you bought like a black,
Yeah.
I've never seen navy
That's
like
why I was saying
in the
I've been
store.
looking and I
Yeah,
haven't seen it. I'm
yeah,
like, well,
yeah. And then when you're sewing, because the stitching doesn't go all the way
Yeah.
through and you still don't want it to,
Yeah.
just be careful to like hold it apart
open.
and keep checking the front. Like hold the two pieces apart and then keep checking the front as you're sewing and make sure that you're not catching that front layer, so that you don't have like 3 random stitches on the
Yeah, that
outside.
would be cute.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah.
like that.
But yeah, I don't think you need to replace all of it. I think you can just get some like black and
Oh.
cut the pieces to size.
That might hurt my heart. Black and the rest of it being blue.
Fair,
So,
fair.
so it's better to just probably replace it than to try to like do a little stitch
Yeah,
situation
yeah,
on this.
especially with this, like, because the actual Velcro is fraying, I don't think that you can salvage, like, you could stitch it on in the middle, but eventually it's just gonna fall
Okay.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The other thing I had was annoying hemming because I haven't done it yet. I haven't felt like doing it, so I just brought it with me.
well, I have all of the stuff that you need to
There
fix
we
it
go.
here if you want to do that now.
Well, because these two are done, so yeah, that might be where I end up.
Yeah, yeah. Did you bring something with you?
No, I really didn't, but I'm glad because once you took that out, I was like, oh, why didn't I bring mine? But now I know how to do it.
You know, at
Yeah.
the Warrenwear thing was at RIT, because that's where I went to school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I went to RIT.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yep. I noticed your shirt. I was like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, that's my story here. I have boring pants. This is my hemming thing. I brought pants
Mhm.
that I know how short he is, so I just have to measure him. But here we are.
Yeah, yeah. So for a basic hat, can I see the
Oh,
hems
of
on
course.
these?
I mean, actually, these don't look that bad. Sometimes they drag and then they look.
Yeah,
rough-
yeah.
rough look.
So,
So this
since-
is like the one that's long. That's like the right size,
Mhm.
and this one is the one that's not.
yeah. So for a basic hem like these on like a pair of work pants or like a pair of kids pants, as long as you can fit the leg over your sewing machine,
Mhm.
you can do these on the machine. I don't like to
Absolutely.
do like slacks on the machine,
Yeah.
but like these, I would just slide that right over the machine and sew up with the closest thread that you can find. Yep.
That's good.
My machine actually has a stitch that does that blind hem
Yeah.
that you were doing.
Ugh,
Oh, you
mine does
can?
not have that.
Yeah, but every time I do it, I have to like do a test one because like you have to fold the fabric like.
And it's gotta be
funky
just
way.
so, yeah, yeah.
And I never remember how to do it because I do it like once every like 8 years.
Yeah, yeah, it might even be easier just to do it by hand than to figure out how to do it
No,
by
it's
the
never
machine
tried
again.
at that point.
Yep. Tara, I don't see any comments. Tara, did you have any projects that you are trying to fix and we didn't cover today?
Asked in the chat if anyone had questions. I said no, there's no like camera.
Okay,
So nothing yet.
all right.
Oh, someone, can you show us how to sew a button?
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. Losing a button, if you don't know how to sew a button on, losing a button can be the one thing that like incapacitates your wardrobe. And it's a really, really simple fix. So I'll show you how to sew on a regular button, like a button with holes in it, and then also a button with a shank. And I'll show you what the difference between those two things is too. Okay. So here I have your standard button, just a classic button, 2 holes. If you've got a button with 4 holes, you sew it on basically the same way. This is a button with a shank. It doesn't have any visible holes. Instead, it has this shank on the back. This is where your hole is. And the point of this is to hold it away from your fabric. So you'll see a lot of these on like a pair of pants, you might see a button with a shank, or on a jacket, you'll see buttons with shanks, and that's because the fabric is thicker. So you need more space between the button and your fabric so that you can fit both pieces of fabric behind that button. And they're sewn on slightly different too, so that you've got that extra space. So we'll do the regular old button first. And for this, again, we're always starting from the back so that any knots that we made are hidden. And we find our buttonhole someday. And we literally are just going through one hole and then through the other. You don't want to go back through the hole that you just sewed through. You want to keep sewing in the same direction, just because you don't want to accidentally go through the same exact spot and pull your thread out. But you'll just do this until it matches whatever the other buttons on your jacket, blazer, shirt look like. So I usually like 4 or 5 in a regular thread. If you're stitching with like the really thick thread that I was using earlier, you can get away with just going around twice. And then once you've got that, I'll also show you how to knot something really closely to the fabric. So you make your loop, put your end through your loop, and then you've got the tail on one side and your loop on the other, and you just kind of like wiggle them around until the place that they meet is right up against that fabric. So that's where your knot is going to be. You put your fingernail over that and then just pull the tail. And that way your knot is very, very close to your fabric. All right. And then I'm going to stitch. I'm going to re-knot this, and I'll show you how to sew a button with a shank.
So we need to do the one knot. That's secure enough.
that's secure enough. If you like, you can do more than one. If it's something that's getting heavily used, I'll show the other. So there's another way that my mom always finishes off a knot. This is the simple one that I'm used to showing in like kids programs. But my mom does a different like knot at the end of sewing. So when you are doing a button with a shank, again, you're going to start from the back. And you're going to come through. And I'm going to leave a little bit of room here and go back through. So I don't want the button to be like dangling off, but I also don't want it to be super tight against my fabric. So I'm going to hold it away from the fabric by like a centimeter. And then I'm going to poke this needle back through. Make sure I keep that out. And the shank you want to be very, very secure because it's not plastered against your fabric. You want to make sure that it stays exactly where you put it. So I'm going to wrap this thread around the thread and create sort of like an extra shank out of thread. And then I'm going to stitch back down. So you can also, what I should have done first is to stitch through that hole a few times and then wrap the shank and then stitch back through. So this is what that looks like. Like I said, I should have gone through the hole more times before I stitched around, but it should have a little bit of room to wiggle around. You don't want it to be super stiff because you want to get something else in behind it. And I'll show you the other way that I've done. This is the way that I usually do knots at home. So I usually will stitch back through my fabric once. And then this loop, I basically stitch through the loop a bunch of times. So I've got a loop here, I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to hold on to my tail, tighten my first loop, and now I've got a new loop that I made with the tail. I'm going to go through that again, tighten that one, go through that again, tighten that one, and then I'll pull through. And now I've got a really secure knot on the back of my fabric. Yeah, like I said, I should have stitched through it a few extra times. I probably should have gone through the hole like 3 times before I went around the shank. But it should be a little loose. And base how loose it is on your current project. So whatever you're repairing, if you're repairing a jacket that has buttons with shanks on it, that jacket probably has at least 5 buttons. Look at the other buttons and see how loose or tight they are, and base how loose or tight your button is on how the original stuff is. Unless they're all popping off, in which case if they might be too tight. So like you might actually be repairing something that was not quite right, like factory made. So, but if you only are missing one, it might just be like loose threads, and try to like match. Again, with all these repairs, it's all about like matching threads and weights and like how tight the original buttons are. So look at what you're fixing and try to match match your repair to the original. Yep. Were there any other?
Button with the 4 holes. Does it matter if you like crisscross, if you go back and forth?
No, you can go back and forth on both sides. You can go across. I've seen people do like artistic button like things on the buttons with 4 holes. You can do whatever you want as long as it's on there and the edges aren't covered. It doesn't really matter. Yep. Sure. All right. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, how would I sew this?
Okay, let's see.
Because again, this is a double, this is lined, so this seems like it would be really weird to try and mend.
Okay,
Because I,
so,
want to re-sew that top edge.
and you don't want it to tear again. Okay,
Yeah.
so what I would do with this one is actually I would probably slide some fusible in underneath. So I'll grab some right now. So you can just slide this into the hole. Make sure everything is nice and flat and that this is facing up toward the hole.
The part with the glue.
Yep, the part with the glue. And then you can iron that flat so that that's sticking, and then you can stitch the repair. So I would probably stitch just like back and forth, like a zigzag stitch across the hole.
Okay.
And then you can stitch this down. How invisible do you want it to be?
This is a work jacket, so it probably doesn't need to be all that invisible.
So depending on what you want to do, so I would fuse this in and then stitch a zigzag across, put this down, and you can do back stitches along the lines of these stitches if you want. And that would hold this. You can also just do like a zigzag that goes all the way across this repair. And you want to hold that fusible in. So you might even want to do like a line of stitching around. It's kind of
fusing the
after fusing.
Oh.
So fuse first and then do a line of stitching to like hold that fusible. Because if you noticed on the jeans, and this is why like fusibles and like the those like fusible patches, those denim patches that you can buy at like Joann, I don't really love, because fusibles fall off eventually. Like this was fused at one point, but it's not forever. So if you want to do a repair that's going to last, you have to stitch over it too. So yeah, I would stitch over it, like just in a small circle around it. Yeah.
So how would you backstitch this if we've already sewn this section?
Yeah. So I'm grabbing this because this, like your sweatshirt, has 2 layers. It's a pair of lined pants. And when you're fixing it, you'll have that fusible in there and it'll be fused already to that front layer. And you'll kind of pull the front layer away from the, the back layer, and you're just gonna have to keep checking. So I wouldn't do, oops, I want to start from the inside. I wouldn't actually do a back stitch around the edge. I would do a running stitch because you're really just trying to hold that on. So you're just kind of like holding that top layer up away from the bottom layer. And then you'll sew all the way around. And you can see, like, you want to keep checking, like, did I sew through? No, I did not. Because those bottom layers, like the 2 layers, are going to want to move and not always together. So if you stitch through them, you might end up tearing something that you didn't mean to. And then if you like keep checking, and if you like stitch through by accident, you can always undo like a couple. You just don't want to get all the way to the end and realize you stitched through at the very beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 of 400 is wrong.
Yeah. So just hold those 2 layers apart from each other as you're stitching around.
Okay.
Yep.
I realize I have.
Yeah.
This is a cheap, very cheap. but like I can't put anything in this pocket because it's broke.
Yeah.
So what would be the best?
So for this, since the fabric itself is not broken, I would probably just close that up and then stitch it closed with either a running stitch or a whip stitch. Yeah, since the fabric itself isn't frayed or ripped, like the jacket lining, since that's frayed and ripped, you don't want to repair into a fray or a rip. So, but that looks fine. It's just the thread that broke. Yep. All right. Anybody else? I think we are at time. So if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer them. But if not, yeah. Oh, did you? Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Questions in the chat?
And guys in the chat, don't forget that we do have 2 sewing machines that you can borrow from the library. And we also have sewing machines in the makerspace that you can sign up to use.
I think it's a meeting room A up front by the gallery.
Yeah, so if you don't have a machine at home and you need one for the repair that you're trying to do, come here, we have machines.
Where's the makerspace?
The makerspace is right in this hallway. So you know where the gallery is? If you go all the way to the end of the gallery and turn right, there are signs for the makerspace. It's a glass room with a bunch of really cool equipment on the left-hand side. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no one in there right now.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to use the
I
machine?
would give it a go.
Okay.
I think the iron might be a good choice first, considering the state of this maybe pants. They were they were in the sewing pile, so they've had a little trouble.
Yeah, let me grab some thread choices for you.